enter that no-stack developer who just wants a stable stack infrastructure and all of the controllers, analytics, orchestration, and service chaining just to work. Want to simplify that communication with the resources. Want the visibility to know what's going on inside that workflow, and just wants to express needs and wants out of, say, Cloud Foundry directly through the rest of it without actually ever knowing about that whole stack underneath and all those layers. So towards that end, we could continue with let 1,000 flowers bloom and let 1,000 communities rise and let it continue the way that we're currently operating now. But it is the same developers that are trying to build out this entire architecture and all these pieces. It would be good to potentially have some planning around how to allocate the resources or what's the key focus and what needs to be fulfilled inside that architecture, and then align the cost as today that we've built a number of these networking foundations. Some are outstandingly well resourced, some are interestingly lightly resourced, but yet they have different importance inside those pieces. And when we have a continued next set or continued set of midstream projects like OPNFV, and they are dependent upon that stack working together to build OPNFV, all the projects that they're building upon are operating at different levels, and it's a huge friends and family network that needs to come together to be able to organize that. That's challenging. So my proposal for conversation and for everybody who's involved in this part of the industry is perhaps this is the time to actually talk about creating a networking umbrella over all of these foundations and projects. The actual mechanism of how we could do this with a understanding of the governance structure is really what we're talking about, not the technical structure. Folks are working extremely well inside those projects. Could enable us to get to the point where we can fill in and continue to complete all these pieces that are necessary of both orchestration, config, provisioning into the network and the resources, streaming out that data into a real-time and elastic search type database, again, towards that goal of easily deploying new applications and services out of a PaaS layer, out of something like that Cloud Foundry, and enabling that new community of developers that Jim talked about earlier today to have an understanding and awareness of what they're trying to accomplish in their jobs in the industry and what they're trying to code and how much they actually need to know to get it done. So thank you all very much. I appreciate the time this morning.
Sorry about the slides. Hold on one second. So, sorry about the slides, first of all. But I think if you just press the button hard enough, it's like speaking louder. People will understand you.
I shouted at the guy in the back.
This is one of the best, thesis to a question I get all the time. In fact, a criticism. Like it's, there's this famous quote about, critics and the man in the ring, and I think all of us know that quote. But you can sit there and say, well, there's just too many of these things, and it's all random, and maybe they don't overlap. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. But I think what you're getting at is what I was talking about this morning, and I did shamelessly steal your diagram.
And passed it around.
Yeah, I did. In fact, now just to be public record, Dave and I talked about it. But it's how to create connections. It's how to think broadly, how to preserve what kind of the idea of the developers working well in their communities, but then say, hey, there's a bigger world around here. How do we all work together? So I love it. I think it's just a great thing to talk about this week.
Very minimally, if we can't get an umbrella architecture, we know that a lot of the places that we need to fill in, and as an industry have to work on how to create the communities around those projects to get the job done.
Yeah, and that's what this meeting's all about. So I love it. Thanks so much. Great talk. And what I also want to do today is spend the next 40 minutes or so actually hearing from the projects at the Linux Foundation that are doing this great work, hearing directly from the projects themselves about how things are going, what they're achieving, how they might improve. And so we have a series of sort of lightning talks where I'd like to introduce you to all of our projects, because as I mentioned, the Linux Foundation today, and particularly in the last year, since the last time we all met, is a lot more than Linux. And I'd like to start off with one of our projects that I think most of you have heard of, which is the Cloud Foundry Foundation, and I'd like to invite Chip Childers up on stage to tell us about what's going on in Cloud Foundry. Come on up, let's give a hand for Chip.
Great opening act. Thanks for pulling the crowd up.
Yeah.
How's everybody doing today?
The clicker. Just click right.
So they tell me I have 5 minutes. Good luck with that. Yeah. Lead by example, right? So if you've heard anybody from Cloud Foundry speak in the last year, we've existed as a foundation under the LF since January of 2015, and we've spent a lot of time going around to different conferences. We've given keynotes. We kind of have long-form versions of this discussion. Every time we speak, we tend to start the discussion by talking about the concept of continuous innovation and how important that is to organizations, whether they're for-profit corporations or whether they're government agencies trying to actually service their constituents. The developers and the power that developers have, not just in open source, but writing bespoke applications inside their companies that might be proprietary software. That's okay. That's fundamentally changing industries, all industries. And Mark Andreessen says software is eating the world. That's true. And what the business academic community has really come to realize is that sustainable competitive advantage, that thing that we used to design for, we used to optimize companies for, it's no longer possible. And instead,